Hello everyone, this is Pico Entertainment and we're back again, and here now we have a non-spoiler review of Mortal Kombat. This is the latest live-action adaptation of the classic video game franchise, following the first movie in 1995 and the second movie titled Mortal Kombat Annihilation in 1997. It stars Lewis Tan, Jessica McKinney, Josh Lawson, Mehcad Brooks, Ludin Lin, Joe Tasman and Hiroyuki Sanada. It was directed by Simon McQuaid. Now the setup here is that we are in a present day world where a group of selected skilled fighters are being hunted down by the mysterious Sub-Zero because they all bear the mark of an ancient warrior, Hanzo Hasashi. This indicates that they are part of a new generation of warriors who have the potential to challenge the outworld forces led by sorcerer Shang Tsung in the battle for the destiny of the Earth Realm. Now, when I look at Mortal Kombat overall as a movie, I really refer to it as a sliding scale. It starts off very promising with huge amounts of potential, and then it finds steady ground in its first act, and then halfway through it just completely loses its way to end up feeling both flat and uninspired. There are moments of imagination and intentions of something epic, and this is particularly in the opening act. The first opening 7 minutes of the movie were released online, and to be honest, this part of the movie is great. You know, we get a very opening prologue, if you like, the beginning origins of both Scorpion and Sub-Zero, two of the most iconic characters of the whole franchise, and this was fantastic. It's got that epic feel about it, boldness and seriousness of so many other great Japanese epic movies that we've seen, certainly within the last 10 to 15 years, and this is fantastic. And at this point I was really enjoying the movie. We get a steady build of introduction of various characters within a small group continuity, and it builds up steadily. We get to understand them, what they're about, where they're coming from, and we get to join them on the various quests that they want to embark on, and this is okay. But then that small kind of plot setting and world building really gives way to much more of a typical generic beat 'em up action, and I think this is maybe an effort to really satisfy fans of the game who obviously are invested in this movie because they want to see the various founts of fights and abilities and the iconic fatality moves that we know so much from the game. And the second half of the movie really feels tacky, schlocky and choppy in terms of its editing. To me, clearly there were parts of the movie that were taken out. I think there was a longer version of this movie which, as I mentioned before, really expanded on the world building, and it kind of got cut in order to sacrifice itself for more fighting action. The tournament dynamic of the game isn't really here either. The tournament itself, I think, is very important to any game or adaptation of Mortal Kombat because it really gives that scope of tension, and you can really focus a lot more on two combatants fighting each other, and this can give potential for far more standout scenes. But in this movie they just throw everything out in the open, and we have all of these multiple fights happening across all of these various locations at the same time. We're just jumping from one encounter to the next, and no fight really has the chance to really be its own individual standout element of the movie. Everything just feels very generic and one-off and very disposable overall, and that's a big mistake if you are adapting a beat-em-up adaptation. There's no style, there's no real flair, there's no coordination to any of these fight scenes, and they look very clunky, I think, throughout the movie. We get a huge assortment of cast of characters, which I think overall was too much. Clearly there was an effort by the filmmakers to include as many characters as they possibly could from the game, again to satisfy fans, but I think the film suffers because of this. In terms of the actual adaptation of the characters, I think overall there were mixed results. So if we look at the positives, first off, we have Josh Lawson as Kano, and he is clearly the standout character of the movie. He's a mercenary that is captured early on by Sonya Blade. He's very blunt, he's very colourful in terms of his language and his personality, and he does really generate all of the humour. He has some great one-liners, some very funny scenes, and he really helps the first part of the movie, I think, keep it much more on that grounded level, and he's a nice counterbalance to the more serious characters that we see throughout the first half of the movie. I think Jessica McKinney as Sonya Blade is a very strong and resolute presence. She's part of a special forces group alongside Mehcad Brooks as Jax, who is their partner, And both are very prominent at the start of the movie, and both give a certain credibility to their roles, and I think they could have overall been the main protagonists throughout the movie. So both of those characters fared very well at the start of this film. Ludin Lin as Liu Kang, he's much more of a powerful warrior, and he was okay. He undoubtedly looks the part, very physically ripped, very physically able, and having more of that nobility about him proves to be a nice counterpoint, I think, to the other characters involved. So in the beginning of the movie, when we stick with these primarily 4 characters, I think the movie is overall on solid ground, and we get to know these characters slightly, and we begin in their journey as well. Obviously, when we go back to the beginning of the movie, Hiroyuki Sanada is fantastic as the descendant, if you like, of the Scorpion tribe of warriors. He's great, and like I mentioned before, him in his opening scene along with Josh Tamslin is really part of the best opening of the movie, and they just bring that sense of weight and gravitas to the movie, even though they're in it in only small parts. Now, we unfortunately go on to the bad interpretations of the characters, and it's really the more godlike characters that fail this movie overall. So we look at Tadano Asano as Raiden, and he was completely the wrong choice. Raiden is this more typical godlike character, so really all of the grandiosity and the gravitas should be coming from Raiden, but we get none of that with this character. He is completely miscast. He just has none of the grandeur or the aura about him that we want to associate with Raiden. Even though we get some nice special effects when he exhibits all the lightning every time he comes on screen, he was just completely the wrong choice for this role. Chin Han as Shang Tsung, he's an actor who really, I think, is most famously known in terms of mainstream audiences, but he's largely underutilized here. He lacks, again, any gravitas or seriousness about him, and he looks very awkward. I noticed throughout many scenes he looks this sweaty part. I don't know if that was intentional, because as we all know, Shang Tsung is a shapeshifter, but he just looked very uncomfortable in all of the scenes that he's involved in, and all of the dialogue that he speaks out looks very stifled and looks very rigid throughout. And all of the other characters that we see throughout the movie, whether it's Kabal, Melina, Kung Lao, they all feel nondescript, and they potentially could have been great characters. And I personally feel there was a large group of characters that really should have been saved for a sequel. It would have helped the film have a lot more of that breathing space, so we can concentrate on a primary core of characters. And I think there is such an expansive list of Mortal Kombat characters within its set mythology. I think some could have been spared, I think, for the second film that we potentially could have got within this franchise. We then go on to, I think, the biggest talking point, and that is Lewis Tan as Cole Young. He is essentially this MMA fighter that we see at the beginning of the movie, and he, of course, bears the mark like all the others. He's typically the main audience view of character that we are supposedly meant to go on this journey on throughout this movie. He's very reluctant at the start to be involved with the mission of the Mortal Kombat, but he gets drawn in later on. And many fans will be disappointed because, without spoiling too much, just in case you're not familiar with the Mortal Kombat mythology, he essentially is the replacement for one of the most iconic characters within the franchise. And in the beginning, he starts off okay, I would admit, but over the film, he feels less important and less integral to the storyline. And there is certain stages at this film where I think we didn't even need to see Cole Young. He really isn't that important, and he gets certain abilities, but they don't really feel that special overall. And I think he's overshadowed, I think, by certain other characters where we get to the middle part of the movie. And I think it's just disappointing overall that this is meant to be the main protagonist, and he just feels very bland, lacking any real sense of personality or charisma about him. So we go on to other aspects of the film, and much of the effect shots look unfinished, especially from the fight choreography, and that itself feels very clunky at times and very uncoordinated, which really shouldn't be the case when you are adapting a fighting game. And it just feels very disappointing. As I mentioned before, there are no standout fight scenes, and yes, there are much inclusions of the fatalities from the game, and of course it's that very R-rated violence and language that we would associate with Mortal Kombat. So that was good that they stuck to the R rating, that I mentioned that in my trailer review. But again, it feels very uninspired, lacking that dramatic edge or tension overall. And there's no thrill to this movie. There's no spectacle to this movie. It just feels like they spliced it together in the second half, and they didn't really want to pay too much effort in terms of the world building and the story setting. They kind of felt that they could get away with just having all of these fight sequences and references to the game, and I think that was a mistake, because you've really pandered more to the fans of the game, when I think there was potential to satisfy the fans of the game and at the same time bring new audiences to this franchise overall. So sadly, if I wanted to give a score for this movie, I would give it a 5.2 out of 10. Just potential for truly something special in the beginning half, but sadly subsiding away to feeling very flat and uninspired and lacking any imagination or skill or wit overall. And sadly, I'm going to have to say this is another disappointing live action adaptation within the Mortal Kombat franchise. So overall, those are my thoughts and feelings on Mortal Kombat. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I may shortly provide a spoiler review when I talk about some of the other elements of the movie that didn't work as well as the others, so look out for that in the future. Please also hit those like and subscription buttons and notifications so I can provide you with more high quality content and reviews in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.